Hi, my name's Sat, and welcome to this quick review of Simon Squibb's new book, What's Your Dream? I picked this up just before Christmas 2025 for those of you watching in the future. I didn't think I'd learn much from it because I've read a lot of similar books before. I'm glad I did because I learned a lot and got some very fundamental takeaways really that will help me in my personal situation for my 2026 goals. I came across Simon's videos on YouTube, as you probably did, in 2025. I really liked how he was helping young people to get their ideas out into the world and start launching them and testing them and iterating on them instead of just sitting on them for years and years. So yeah, I really resonated with that, and obviously I saw he was promoting his book, upcoming book, on social media as I was getting to know his content. I saw it in the library before Christmas and I thought I'd pick it up and give it a read, and I'm glad I did because I actually got a lot of notes, almost 9 pages worth, and some really fundamental takeaways that will help me personally, and I thought if I share them with you that you'll find them helpful as well. Before you watch the rest of the video, I might be able to save you some time if you're more of a reader. I have actually written my review on my Substack page. The address is penlounge.substack.com if you wanted to go ahead and read it instead of watching the video. And for those stationery nerds that have come here from the Substack, here is the stationery that I use to write those 9 pages of notes. So I use the Fabriano notebook. It's the Eco Cure Plus A5 lined 90 GSM, 27 lines per page. I actually bought this and the case or cover in Milan when I was there on my last visit to Italy. A really nice shop if you can get to go there. And I use the Caran d'Ache 888 Infinite Ballpoint pen and the Pentel Flowtune 0.8 for the heading. So yeah, if you used any of that stuff, please comment below and tell me what you think. First of all, the most important point that I took out of the book was do things or work that give you energy. I had never really thought about work this way until not only reading it in this book, but literally a few days before I got this one out of the library. I watched an interview with Atul Gawande, who wrote the book Being Mortal. It's a bestseller. And he was saying the exact same thing in a podcast. This is a snippet from it, and I've got the link to this in the description below, and it's timestamped so you don't have to waste your time going through the whole hour. It was a very synchronous moment where I just sort of saw this video a few days before and then read it again in this book. Now, I have read this book called Flow about 7-8 years ago. And at first glance, I thought, well, that's the same thing, doing work that gives you energy and getting flow. But the more I thought about doing work that energizes me, I understood that they're not necessarily the same things at all, although they absolutely could be where there's crossover. And one thing I can think of is you might have to do something extremely important in your job for a client, but it's pretty dull, you have no interest in it whatsoever, but you still get flow by doing it because it's so important. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it energizes you. It could just drain you, in fact. So after taking away this point, I will definitely be prioritizing my dream in 2026 based on doing work that energizes me. And I can see it's going to be a huge motivator for me and help me determine the clarity of purpose that I really need in 2026 and in future. The second very important takeaway I took from this book is a dream is a power source and it's engineered for the long term. This first line's literally a quote. So goals are brittle and only pass time. A dream is built for survival over the long term and is like plugging yourself into the mains when you're drained of energy. This really hit home for me because I found it difficult to get motivated in the past few years, especially since after the lockdowns. I set goals every year, but they were really not going anywhere since sort of 2022 for me personally. And this realization here, which Simon wrote about, is really going to help me pursue meaningful work towards something big. I really need a big purpose in life to get myself, or to keep myself going. And I think that this point here is really closely linked to doing work that energizes you. That's what I think personally. My third important takeaway from the book is you have to escape the trap of aspirations that aren't real dreams. So I'm a fairly minimalist person, and I have been for probably over 10 years now. And I'm no stranger to removing or eliminating unnecessary things in my life, or to stop doing things that make me unhappy or don't really fulfill me. And so reading this point just reiterated that to me again, and it helped me to trim some things out of my life, even further. So a few examples is I've always got a note in my Apple Notes for business ideas that I hear about or come up with myself, and I just deleted a whole bunch of them because I know I'll have no intention to start them. And also I've deleted long-term purchases that I thought that I might want one day, and the big one is a big sort of dream house which will be my forever house to live in one day. And in both scenarios, the business ideas didn't get me excited, and as far as the house goes, I lived in Australia for many years, and I want to move again overseas and be flexible and not be tied down to paying for this massive house in future that's going to need endless maintenance and costs associated with it. The fourth important takeaway from me was that money can be fulfilling, but having it isn't. As Simon talks about, once he was financially free, got into the position where you're not really building or contributing anything to society anymore, and you're just holding on to money. And this is the first time that Simon Squibb said, once he sold his company, he said it's the first time he truly had to ask himself, well, what do I want to do now? And I really relate to this situation. I've worked in sales my whole life until I left the corporate world in 2019. And working in sales, you can do well and you can earn good money, but after a certain point, additional money doesn't bring the utility or the happiness that you think that it would, or that you believed that it would when you're told those stories or believe those stories from a younger age. The fifth really important takeaway from this book, and one that brought a smile to my face, was don't confuse what you're good at with what you like and really want to do. And the reason it made me smile is because I made this mistake myself. So once I left my 20-year tech career, I started my own business, training partners and individuals about technology, the products I'd been selling. And I quickly found after a few months that was really boring, and it didn't really help me get away from what I was trying to get away from by quitting my corporate job. If I wanted to carry on doing that, I should have just stayed there. And so I sort of left the whole tech thing behind and never looked back. So you might be doing something, you could be a builder or a fashion designer or whatever. Now, you could be working for a company and you're thinking, well, I want to leave and do this myself. Have a true think about, is that really what you want to do? Because you will just end up putting yourself under more stress doing that thing yourself than having the resources of a corporation behind you. So the sixth important takeaway for me was serious people say I am. And there's a spiritual lens to this. I've read many spiritual and self-development books, and this kind of thing comes from the manifesting side of that world. So Simon says, through a few examples, serious people say, I'm a pilot, or I'm an investor, or I'm building a fashion brand. They don't say, I'm planning to, or I want to, or I will. And by using that positive I am vocabulary, these people bring the future into the present and remove barriers by doing this. When you believe something with conviction, it always manifests. In my experience, it has done with lots of things, whether it comes to work or stuff that I wanted to buy. So I absolutely 100% agree with this. The seventh important takeaway was that retirement is a fake dream. There's nothing worse than someone who used to be busy. I learnt this firsthand when I went traveling to Australia in my 20s. I thought it would be awesome to spend a year traveling down the East Coast from Cairns to Melbourne and spending all of my time on beaches all day and relaxing or having a beer. And I found after 5 months, I was totally bored out of my brains. And I was really happy that I realized at such a young age that holidays and vacations and time off and relaxation is great when it's a reward for working really hard for a certain period of time. And in that particular situation, by month 6 of my year in Australia, I got a job there, and that's why I ended up staying there. And that's another story for another video. But this whole thing that retirement is not really what it's cracked up to be is something I've heard from other friends in the past whose parents had retired earlier than mine, and they were saying that, especially the men, the guys are often very bored and they don't really have much to do if they didn't spend the bulk of their life building up and maintaining friendships as well. And the last most important takeaway I took from the book was that a business must have purpose, and that without purpose, a business at best can retain a group of individuals which will work in a way that is best for them, not necessarily the company, or at worst, they'll just quit after a certain period of time anyway. And this really makes sense to me because when I think back to my previous jobs in my career, the place that I enjoyed working at the most was where I worked at last, which was Amazon Web Services. And I really liked Amazon because their mission is to be Earth's most customer-centric company. And that's not just something they've written on the wall. You know, it's something that I resonated with because I observed it every day at work, and it was foremost in my thoughts, in my interactions with customers and colleagues and technology partners as well. And contrast that to other companies I've worked for example, Dell. That was a great job that I had for 3 years in the early 2000s, but if they had a mission statement, I can't even recall it, or if they had a purpose. And, you know, all they ever talked about at Dell was trimming costs to the bone, and that was it, which is not very inspiring. You can do well in working there and passing time, but it's certainly not inspiring. And there's other tech companies I've worked at that have not been on either extreme, but somewhere in the middle. But if you have a truly valuable purpose that multiple people from different areas of life can get behind, then that is part of the recipe for running a great company and a great business. So that was it. They were my 8 key points that I took away from Simon Squibb's book. Like I said at the beginning, if you want to read the takeaways on my Substack, there's the address there, penlounge.substack.com. So feel free to share your comments either there or in the YouTube comments below. And check out the description for some of the links to the items that I mentioned at the start of the presentation. Thanks, and see you in the next video.